Hello, strange traveler. It seems as if you seek lodging and counsel from me. Well, our time together is short, so we must make haste. Hurry onwards. So, without further ado, let us get right into the lesson for today. Let us begin today's teachers by me saying that I am not going to have that voice for the entirety of today's video. So, in today's video, I'm going to be starting a little temporary series called Dismal in Disguise. I'll be continuing this through the months of September and October as a sort of Halloween-themed series. And in this series, I'll be covering how to create creepy aspects in your campaign, from dark and unsettling combat encounters to ominous and strange NPCs. We'll be discovering how to add a slight tinge of dark fantasy to your campaign to unsettle and creep out your players. Now, I myself personally love doing this. I love having that slight tinge of creepiness to a campaign, as it keeps the action moving, it keeps the players guessing at what is going to happen, as that type of campaign is quite unpredictable. Things can come out of absolute nowhere. But to start us off, for the first episode of Dismal in Disguise, we're going to be covering how to make unsettling and dark combat encounters, how to creep out your players as they encounter strange and mysterious monstrosities in the dark places of the world. Let's start off this episode by talking about monster choice. What kind of monsters are you going to put into an encounter to terrify your players? Now, there's two ways that you can go about this. Firstly, you can go the classic way, or you can go the horrific way. Now, the difference between these is pretty strong. When you're going for classical horror monsters, you're going to be going for monsters which people think of when you say D&D scary monster. These include beholders, mind flayers, maybe mimics, and the like. Now, the other side of the spectrum, horrific monsters, tend to be a bit strange. Monsters like the crawling claw and the gibbering mouther are good examples of this route which you can take. And personally, I really like the idea. You could also build up more of a psychological terror, allowing your players to become comfortable with their surroundings or the people surrounding them, and then suddenly turn on them. However, be careful with this, as you can make your players extremely paranoid if you use it too much. Monsters such as the Oblex and Doppelganger, which are shape changers, can allow you to do this, and they can morph into a well-trusted NPC of the players and slowly twist around the perspective of the world. But let's jump into the details for making a combat encounter with classic horror monsters. Now, to use classic horror monsters in your unsettling combat encounter, you need to play off of niches. Now, what I mean by this is you need to play off of stereotypes surrounding those monsters, but put a twist on them. Now, the Dungeon Master's Guide actually does cover this very idea quite well, so let's turn to that for some guidance and go from there. It might seem stereotypical to build an adventure around dragons, orcs, and insane wizards and towers, but these are staples of fantasy storytelling. It might also seem trite to begin an adventure in a tavern, but that's an idea that remains true to D&D. Familiar story elements are fine, as long as you and the players occasionally put a spin on them. For example, the mysterious figure who presents adventures with a quest on behalf of the king might be the king in disguise. The crazy wizard in the tower might be a projected illusion created by a band of greedy gnome thieves to guard their loot. So we can kind of see from that that's a little bit broader. This is covering simply adventures, but we're focusing on combat encounters. However, it does shed a little light on how we should use classical monsters to create that horrific feel, that horrific rush of adrenaline. So to play off the staples and the strengths of the Beholder, for example, we could emphasize its otherworldly nature. It could seem warped, twisted. We could put on a more mental and psychological twist to the encounter itself, and maybe the players would have to be constantly making wisdom saving throws to avoid being just scared out of their wits or just absolutely mind-boggled by the strange nature of this creature. And to continue on the Beholder tangent, you can also use a Death Tyrant, which is essentially, if you don't already know, a Death Tyrant is the wicked dreams of a Beholder incarnate, and is extremely powerful. And the Death Tyrant takes the form of an empty Beholder skull with small glowing lights representing each of the eyes of the Beholder, including all of its eye stalk eyes and its one central eye. Another way to approach just horrific combat encounters in general is to play off of the senses of the players. For example, with the Death Tyrant, what sense do they mainly affect? Sight, because of the glowing lights which represent each of their eyes. Now you could play off of that by having the area which the players encounter that Death Tyrant in being completely dark, or at least dimly lit. As the Death Tyrant slowly wakes up from his slumber, the eyes could slowly come into focus, the light blinking into existence. And perhaps it could have a slightly darker red tone, glinting off the armor, weapons, and the skin of the PCs. So you want to play off the senses, and you want to play off the tropes of the monsters. Those are the two main things so far. But there's one more step which you must definitely take into account. Setting. The setting of an encounter makes up almost, I would say, 90% of the tone of the encounter. For example, I am running a campaign right now where the players recently dove inside a giant worm. Now, player spoilers ahead, please, if you are a player, skip to the posted time code right here. Skip to that timestamp now. Don't you dare listen to this, or I will find you. I will find you, and I will take your character sheet. Anyway, so they're diving into this worm, and all of the walls are made up of flesh. There's hydrochloric acid or stomach acid just spilled all over the floor, just dripping from the ceiling. There's walls of fat lining the flesh. However, this isn't an actual worm. It's actually an echo plane in my world where oozes and slimes and monstrosities originate from. But they were going through this labyrinthian dungeon of flesh. They stumbled upon a few sturges, fought those sturges off, and then found some gibbering mouthers. Now, I thought these gibbering mouthers would act as white blood cells for this giant echo plane, and they would defend against foreign intruders, but not worry about anything which originated from the plane. Now, these gibbering mouthers, I would say, were definitely on the more horrific side rather than the classical side, but the setting made everything for this encounter. The idea that these gelatinous masses of eyes and mouths sliding across the ground really fit in with the fleshy home which they had. And later on, the players even fought an Oglex, which can absorb memories and make duplicates of the people which they have absorbed the memories of. So, the setting went right in line with the monsters which I chose. And that should go for really every encounter which you choose, but especially horrific encounters which are designing to creep out and unsettle your players. And there should be something strange and abnormal about this dungeon or this area which they're going to encounter these monsters in. For example, going back to the Death Tyrant or Beholders, I would say maybe the strange, otherworldly far realm has slightly melded with this area, and some of the laws of physics and nature are completely void, completely gone in this area. So that can really add a twist, a really strange feeling to a dungeon, and it needs to be strange. It needs to be abnormal to actually feel unique and feel terrifying all the while. So I think that's classical monsters covered pretty well. If you have anything else which I want to cover considering classical monsters, please put it down in the comments, and I'll cover it in the next episode of Dismal in Disguise. But I'm going to move on to the second type of monster which you can use in a horrific combat encounter. Horrific monsters. When comparing classic scary D&D creatures to horrific D&D creatures, it's like a single shot compared to the whole bottle. If you're going for a slight tinge of dark fantasy, or a once in a while thing in your normal high fantasy campaign of, oh well, you have a certain dungeon which has a little more of a creepy vibe to it, then go for your classic scary creatures. However, if you're going for a full-on horrific, terrifying campaign, then definitely go for horrific D&D creatures. Am I the only one which wonders why terrifying and terrific mean opposite things even though they have the same base word? English is stupid sometimes. When using horrific D&D creatures in your combat encounters, or really any encounter in general, you're going to want to play off of natural fears of us humans. Some of these natural fears include mass amounts of insects, darkness, animal death, other things like that. You don't want to go too extreme with this, or you get too far into the blown out realm of things, which you don't want to do. You want to get it just enough creepiness, just enough of an unsettling tone that the players are constantly guessing at what is going to happen next, and that is what you want. Next, you're going to want to play off of, once again, the strengths of these creatures. For example, the gibbering mouther, you're going to want to play off of the gelatinous ooze, the form, and just not blow that out of proportions, but definitely describe it in a lot of detail. Another example is the crawling claw. With the crawling claw, you are going to want to have a lot of those. A lot of them. They are a very low CR creature, so you are just going to want to have hordes of these things coming at the players at one time, maybe even in waves. But I would suggest small, cramped space, lots of these things crawling on the walls, crawling on the ceiling, crawling on the floor, just coming at the players. Alright, so now that we've covered all of the most vital steps to making unsettling and dismal combat encounters, I'm going to create an example using the steps and using the methods which I just told you all. An insane wizard of the name of Uzars has recently created and taken up residence of a labyrinthian collection of large tunnels snaking every way, this way and that. Now, Uzars is driven by ideals which on the surface may seem just and good, but when you dig a little deeper, they become much more sinister. Uzars is extremely driven to create a perfect world, especially void of murderers. Uzars is so driven to kill all murderers and murderous thoughts that he severed both hands off of 1,000 murderers and turned them into crawling claws, which are tiny undead that crawl along the ground as severed hands. Uzars uses these crawling claws to protect his series of tunnels from attack. These claws patrol in groups of 50 to 100 at once, skittering along the ground, walls, and floor of the circular tunnels which they patrol. Now, the PCs could easily encounter multiple of these patrols of these crawling claws, and this would be absolutely terrifying, either from in front of them, behind them. These things would come skittering across the ground, all just covering the surface of that tunnel, and you can just see this mass of moving, severed hands coming toward you, and it's absolutely terrifying because of their numbers, which is one of the things which can definitely make your horrific D&D creatures and your encounters with them. And I think that about covers it. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you all enjoyed this new series, Dismal in Disguise. Please tell me what you think of it down in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions on it. And I will continue to make videos for Dismal in Disguise up until the end of October. Please hit that like button. Don't forget to comment down below your opinions of this new series which I've thought up. And don't forget that subscribe button so you don't miss a single one of my videos and you're able to see all of the Dismal in Disguise episodes as they come out. Have a spooky day, keep on creating, and I will see you in the next video.